Shadowing is one of the most effective techniques for improving spoken English because it trains the brain, mouth, and ears to work together in real time. When a learner listens to a native speaker and repeats the words immediately, they begin to internalize the natural flow of the language. This includes the pronunciation of individual sounds, the stress placed on certain syllables, and the rhythm that gives English its unique musical quality. Unlike slow, controlled speaking exercises, shadowing forces learners to react instantly, helping them break free from overthinking and instead speak more automatically. This automatic response is essential for developing confidence, because when a learner no longer hesitates or pauses to translate, their speech becomes more natural and fluid. Another reason shadowing improves pronunciation and confidence is that it exposes learners to authentic, real-world speech patterns. Many English learners struggle with connected speech, reductions, and the blending of words in everyday conversation. For example, phrases like "I want to go" often sound like "I wanna go" when spoken by natives. Shadowing allows learners to mirror these natural patterns, which are difficult to learn from textbooks alone. By consistently copying a native speaker's pace and tone, learners start to adopt the same patterns without even realizing it. Over time, their speech begins to sound more like that of a native speaker, and this increased accuracy significantly boosts their confidence when speaking with others. Shadowing also helps learners overcome fear and self-consciousness. Speaking out loud can feel intimidating, especially when someone is afraid of making mistakes or being judged. However, during shadowing practice, the learner is not speaking alone. They are speaking with the guidance of a model voice. This creates a supportive environment that encourages repetition without pressure. As learners continue practicing, they become more comfortable hearing their own voice in English. The more they repeat the phrases, the more familiar the sounds become, and the less foreign the language feels. This comfort translates directly into real conversations, where the learner begins to speak more boldly and with greater assurance. Finally, consistent shadowing builds fluency by strengthening the muscles involved in speech. Just like athletes train their bodies through repetition, English learners train their tongue, lips, and vocal cords through repeated imitation. This physical training helps them produce English sounds more smoothly and naturally, reducing the effort required to speak and increasing their overall confidence. Asterisk repeating sentences immediately after a native speaker is a powerful method for building natural fluency because it forces learners to process and produce language at the same pace as real communication. When learners hear a sentence and then imitate it right away, they activate both listening and speaking skills at the same time. This dual activity helps the brain develop faster connections between comprehension and expression, which is essential for speaking smoothly. Instead of pausing to think about grammar or translating from their native language, learners begin to respond instinctively. This instinctive response is the foundation of true fluency and helps shift learners away from slow, mechanical speech toward more natural communication. Shadowing also exposes learners to the natural speed of spoken English. Textbook dialogues and classroom exercises often slow speech down for clarity, but real conversations move quickly. By repeating immediately after a native speaker, learners train themselves to keep up with normal rhythm and pace. This practice gradually reduces the feeling of being overwhelmed during real conversations. Over time, learners become more comfortable handling faster speech and are better prepared to understand native speakers in everyday situations. As a result, they begin to speak with fewer pauses and fillers because their brain becomes accustomed to the natural flow of the language. Another important aspect of repeating sentences right away is the improvement it brings to intonation and stress. English is a stress-timed language, meaning that certain words and syllables carry more emphasis, which shapes the entire meaning of a sentence. When learners try to copy the speaker immediately, they automatically mirror these stress patterns. This helps them sound more expressive and less monotonous. Intonation, such as rising and falling pitch, is also absorbed through this imitation. These subtle elements are difficult to learn through reading alone, but become much easier when practiced in real time with a native model. As learners master these patterns, their speech becomes clearer and more understandable. In addition, immediate repetition strengthens short-term memory and improves accuracy. The learner must pay close attention to the sound, structure, and rhythm of each sentence to repeat it correctly. This high level of focus trains the brain to recognize patterns in English more quickly. With repeated practice, these patterns become automatic, allowing learners to form correct sentences with less effort. This automaticity is what makes speech feel natural rather than forced. Through consistent practice, learners gain fluency that comes from familiarity, confidence, and the ability to use English spontaneously. Practicing daily strengthens muscle memory for English sounds because repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity leads to automatic speaking. When learners practice English only once in a while, their tongue, lips, and vocal cords do not get enough consistent training to remember how certain sounds should be produced. English contains many sounds that may not exist in a learner's native language, so the mouth needs repeated practice to form them correctly. Daily practice helps build physical memory, much like learning to play a musical instrument or training for a sport. With consistent repetition, movements that once felt difficult begin to feel natural, and the learner no longer needs to consciously think about how to pronounce each word. Daily practice also strengthens cognitive memory. The brain becomes more efficient at recognizing patterns, structures, and common phrases in English. When learners encounter the same sounds and sentence patterns every day, their brain starts storing them in long-term memory instead of treating them as new information each time. This familiarity makes listening easier. And as listening becomes easier, speaking improves as well. The learner starts recalling words more quickly and expressing ideas more smoothly. Over time, daily repetition eliminates hesitation, which is one of the biggest obstacles to fluency. The more the brain hears and produces English, the faster it becomes at responding in real conversations. Another benefit of daily practice is that it reduces fear and increases confidence. When learners expose themselves to English every day, the language becomes part of their routine rather than something unfamiliar or intimidating. Speaking out loud daily helps them get used to the sound of their own voice in English, which is a major step in building confidence. Each practice session may seem small, but together they create noticeable progress. Even 5 to 10 minutes a day can make a significant difference when done consistently. This steady improvement encourages learners to keep going, creating a positive cycle of motivation and growth. Daily practice also makes the learning process smoother and more enjoyable. Instead of struggling to relearn what they forgot, learners who practice every day build on what they mastered the previous day. This continuous reinforcement deepens understanding and sharpens pronunciation. The more the muscles and brain are trained through consistent repetition, the easier it becomes to speak clearly, naturally, and without effort. Reading out loud while shadowing helps learners match intonation and tone. Because it combines visual input from the text with auditory input from the speaker. When learners look at the words while listening to a native speaker, they gain a clearer understanding of how written language transforms into spoken language. English pronunciation does not always match spelling, so seeing the text while hearing it spoken naturally helps learners notice patterns, silent letters, and sound changes. As they read along out loud, they imitate the speaker's intonation, allowing them to feel the rhythm of the language instead of simply recognizing it academically. Reading aloud also strengthens pronunciation through active participation. When learners read silently, they may understand the meaning, but they miss the opportunity to practice producing the sounds themselves. Speaking out loud forces the mouth muscles to form English sounds, which helps reinforce proper pronunciation. By combining this with shadowing, learners get immediate feedback from the native model. They can compare their own voice with the speakers and adjust their pronunciation, stress, or tone to match more closely. This real-time imitation makes learning more dynamic and helps learners sound more natural over time. Another powerful advantage of reading aloud during shadowing is the improvement it brings to fluency. Reading gives structure, guiding the learner through complete sentences instead of random phrases. When learners follow the speaker's pace and read at the same time, they practice speaking continuously without pausing to think about what comes next. This eliminates the habit of stopping frequently, which is common when learners rely solely on memorized vocabulary or translation. Through this guided practice, they develop smoother speech patterns and learn how to maintain a steady flow well speaking. This kind of fluency training is difficult to achieve through listening alone and becomes more effective when learners actively produce the language. Reading aloud while shadowing also deepens comprehension. When learners both see and hear the words, their understanding becomes stronger. They learn how tone affects meaning, such as how a rising intonation can indicate a question or how emphasis on a certain word can change the message. Over time, learners begin to naturally use these patterns in their own speech. This improves communication, making it easier for listeners to understand them. By practicing regularly, learners absorb the rhythm, emotion, and melody of English speech, allowing them to express themselves more clearly and confidently in real conversations. Asterisk mistakes are an unavoidable part of language learning, and continuing to practice despite them is one of the most powerful ways to improve. When learners focus too much on avoiding errors, they often become tense, hesitant, and overly careful with their speech. This slows down progress and prevents natural fluency from developing. However, when learners accept that mistakes are a normal part of growth, they free themselves to practice more confidently. Speaking out loud, repeating exercises, and shadowing without worrying about perfection allow learners to experiment with sounds, intonation, and sentence structures. Over time, this freedom leads to rapid improvement because mistakes become opportunities for learning rather than signs of failure. One of the reasons continuing despite mistakes is so effective is that it builds resilience. Learning a new language can feel overwhelming, especially when a learner compares themselves to native speakers or to those who seem more fluent. When learners push forward even when they stumble or mispronounce words, they develop mental strength. This resilience helps them stay motivated and consistent, which are the two most important factors in achieving fluency. Every time they correct a sound, fix a mispronunciation, or understand a grammar point through practice, they take another step forward. If they were afraid of making those mistakes, they would never get the chance to improve. Another benefit of embracing mistakes is that it reduces the fear of speaking. Many learners understand English well, but struggle to speak because they worry others will judge them. This fear creates a barrier that stops them from practicing, especially with native speakers. By accepting mistakes as a natural part of learning, learners gradually reduce this fear. They begin to speak more freely, even if their sentences are not perfect. Over time, the act of speaking becomes less stressful, and their confidence grows. As confidence increases, so does the willingness to practice, and this leads to even more progress. Continuing during mistakes also trains the brain to adapt quickly. When learners shadow or speak in real time, they do not have the luxury of stopping every time they make an error. Instead, they learn to keep going, adjust, and correct themselves while still speaking. This kind of rapid adaptation is essential for real conversations where speech flows continuously. By practicing through errors, learners develop quick thinking, better pronunciation, and smoother speech patterns. In the end, persistence in the face of mistakes becomes one of the strongest tools for building fluency and natural communication. Asterisk. Recording your progress is one of the most powerful habits you can develop while improving your English speaking skills because it turns invisible growth into something you can clearly see and hear. When you record yourself, you capture your real voice, your natural speaking patterns, and the way you actually sound when using English. Many learners are surprised the first time they listen to themselves because it reveals things they never noticed while speaking, such as unclear pronunciation, weak intonation, or hesitation. This awareness is incredibly important because you cannot fix what you cannot hear. By recording regularly, you create a mirror for your voice, allowing you to observe your strengths and weaknesses with honesty and clarity. Another major benefit of recording progress is the ability to compare your past and present speaking levels. Language learning is slow and gradual, and because you hear your own voice every day, it can be difficult to notice improvement. However, when you listen to a recording from weeks or months ago, the difference can be dramatic. You may notice that your pronunciation has become clearer, your speaking speed faster, or your tone more natural. These comparisons provide undeniable evidence that your practice is working. This sense of achievement boosts motivation and gives you the confidence to continue, even on days when you feel stuck or unsure. Recording also helps you set realistic and specific improvement goals. Instead of guessing what to practice, you can listen carefully and identify patterns. Maybe your TH sound is too soft, your sentences are too choppy, or your voice drops at the wrong moments. Once you hear these details, you can focus your next shadowing or speaking practice on correcting them. This targeted approach leads to faster and more efficient improvement because every practice session has a clear purpose. Over time, you'll notice that the habits you correct stay corrected, and your overall speaking ability becomes more polished. In addition, the act of recording builds confidence because it requires courage. Speaking into a microphone without hesitation strengthens your bravery, helping you overcome fears of making mistakes or sounding imperfect. Sharing your recordings with teachers or language partners can bring helpful feedback and encouragement, making your learning journey more interactive and meaningful. Each recording becomes a milestone, a reminder of how far you've come and how much potential you still have by choosing to record your progress. You give yourself the gift of reflection, motivation, and steady improvement, turning every spoken word into a step toward the confident English speaker you are meant to become.